Hey everyone, excited to be back to this week's edition of Frequently Asked Questions for Commercial Real Estate. In today's video, what I want to do is talk about a service that's offered by different entities and individuals in states across the country that could enable you to potentially transact in markets that you currently are not licensed in. And that is, what exactly is a broker of record? So in today's video, we're going to explain what that terminology means, and then also explain how you can leverage the services of these individuals to be able to transact in markets that you yourself are probably not quite licensed in as of yet. So before I have this video, I would greatly appreciate if you could like and subscribe to this channel. It really does help with the YouTube algorithm and ensures more and more people can hear this message and learn about the many facets of commercial real estate. So now you've done that, go ahead and like and subscribe below. Let's go ahead and dive into this episode. All right, so before we dive in, I want to make sure that people clearly understand that I'm not an attorney. I do not provide legal advice. However, I've utilized some of the services of broker of records in the past to be able to transact out of markets that I personally do not have a license in. I'm licensed to conduct real estate sales in Kentucky. So, obviously I'm licensed in this particular market, but if you're branching out into like Ohio or Tennessee or New York or some of these other markets, and you have clients that have needs in those markets, sometimes it's hard to be able to transact because you need to have a broker on site that you go through. Hence where the broker of record comes into play. Broker of records are entities or individuals that are licensed in those particular states that are managing essentially transactions in those markets. So the mechanics of operating with a broker of record is that, let's say you have a client that's a national tenant that's looking for sites really regionally or maybe nationally, and you're trying to help them identify those sites. If you're not licensed in a market that they're looking to operate in, you still want to be able to represent them. You have to identify a broker that is willing to facilitate the transaction in that particular market, and they would essentially become the broker of record. So the mechanics of the of the sale or the lease or whatever would be that you would represent your client, hang your license, quote unquote, with this particular entity for this particular transaction. The transaction will be consummated when a commission is paid. The broker, it would go through the broker of record, and then they would issue the remainder of whatever the fee that you agree to you, and then the transaction would be complete. Now, most of the time with broker of records, they charge a fee, whether that's a percentage fee, like a 10% fee, for example, the commission, or sometimes they'll just charge a flat fee, depending on the different entity. And the whole purpose of the broker of record is to operate legally in the state that you're conducting business in, and they'll hold you accountable and make sure that you're doing all the things that you have to do for that particular state to remain compliant as far as a licensee is concerned. So they'll tell you, hey, this is an additional form you got to fill out because you're dealing in Ohio or New York or whatever other state you're in. So it does help to have that as well, because a lot of times states operate differently. What may be the way you handle things in Kentucky may be slightly different in another market, and so it's very important sometimes, and really it's required because it's legally required to have a broker of record in that market. So as far as value of these types of things, I've used them on several occasions for different transactions outside of my local market, mainly for triple net investment properties. And obviously on the leasing side, there is regional desires for national tenants to be able to operate in. So being able to represent tenants outside of the markets that you're operating in or licensed in, that could be a benefit as well. Now, the reason you may want to use one is if it's a one-off transaction, or maybe transactions that you don't typically operate in those states. Maybe it's wise to just consider using a broker of record to make the transaction go seamlessly, and obviously make sure that you're held accountable in that particular market. Now, if you yourself are transacting in that market very heavily, or you have demands from tenants or clients in that market very heavily, I would almost always encourage people to get licensed in those markets, because over time, if you continue to utilize the services of broker of records in these markets, it can add up. The fees can add up. And, in your case, if it really does make sense, once you do the math and you say, okay, well, I've done 10 or 15 or 20 transactions in the state at this point, through a broker of record, maybe it's wise for me to work on getting my license in that state so I can operate in that state, obviously through my brokerage or whatever. At that point, then obviously you'll be able to transact without having to pay the additional fees of the broker of record. So again, I thought I'd just introduce that concept to a lot of people, because I personally didn't know about those types of services up until relatively recently. I just figured that if you weren't licensed in a state, you couldn't really transact in that state at all. But again, as long as you hang your license with a broker of record in those states, you can transact. They're going to be the ones who make sure all the paperwork will ensure that their paperwork's done properly, And, obviously we'll be in communication with you to make sure that you do all the things you need to do to operate it in a legal way in that state to be able to transact. And obviously all the funds and all the funds for the sale or the lease or whatever will run through that brokerage and then ultimately make it back to your home brokerage. And then your broker will pay you out if you're a licensed salesperson. And so it's kind of the mechanics of a broker of record. If you guys are looking to transact in other markets, again, I've helped several clients already transact in other markets. Be happy to help you guys with that as well. So feel free to give me a call back. Call me at 502-536-7315 to be able to identify properties, in particular on the investment or retail side, that you could be a good fit. Along with that, if you guys like this video, please like and subscribe. It does make a huge impact on our ability to reach a broader audience, and we'd greatly appreciate the support. So thanks so much for tuning in, and we'll see you all next time.